If you are not religious, being with religious people is a baffling experience. Pretty recently, I had a coworker who I would have never believed to be in faith. We got to talking about the topic one time, and he explained to me that some deaths in his family had triggered this change in him. I can be sympathetic to that, but if you don't have a religious bone in your body, the explanation still doesn't really explain anything. When I've tried to ask about how this religious sensation feels, and what he or other believers have that I don't, I haven't really gotten any sort of a comprehensive answer. I get that too. Maybe it would be like trying to explain how color looks like to a blind person, or how apples taste if the other person has never eaten any. Plus, asking for an articulation about such a profound thing may be too much for anyone's self-examination skills. I can get that too. Back in school, in the first grade, my teacher was a devout Christian, and she told us often about the joys of God and Jesus. On religious holidays, we went to the church and I sang off-key psalms just like every other kid. When we had a movie day at school, everyone was brought to the gymnasium to watch the DreamWorks movie Prince of Egypt. Things didn't go any further than this, so it wasn't exactly indoctrination, but the religious stuff was still a constant in the otherwise secular background. Even back then, I couldn't wrap my head around it. I don't live anywhere near the Middle East, yet weekly we were talking about Jerusalem. Religion is one of the core components of being human, whatever you would think about it otherwise, but I was an absolute outsider to it. As time went by, I periodically read more and thought more on the subject, out of sheer curiosity and confusion. Then, a weird thing happened a few years ago. I had been reading about Zen Buddhism, and I decided that I should at least try meditation, since it would cost me nothing and I could do it by myself. I just tried a few times before, but I just couldn't stomach it, but now I would have a more genuine attempt at it. Just sit with your eyes closed and try not to think of anything. Got it? Over half an hour went by as I sat on the floor of my apartment. It did have a calming effect, and I'm sure that it would have all sorts of health benefits the mindfulness fad advertised about. I got up, had something to drink, went to the bathroom, and then decided to continue for a little while longer. It felt completely normal, but after a few minutes I had the strangest experience. The only way I can describe it is that I in a way fell into myself, and it is not possible to feel like that in normal life. I've never done psychedelics, so I had nothing to compare this experience with, and the effect was extremely strong. I lost the sense of myself, like the lights were on, but there was no personality living in the house anymore, even though the spirit itself remained. Startled, I started to fight against all this, and it felt like you were in the bottom of a deep pool, even though it wasn't really you, but just some essence that had lived in you, and I tried to swim to the surface. It was hard work, like trying to run in a dream, and I was going up in a space where there was no up or down, left or right, no matter to tangle with. I succeeded, and I found myself again on the floor of my apartment, perplexed and in utter confusion. I had no idea what time it was, and I wasn't even sure of the day or the week. I could have been in that state for months as far as I knew, but the clock told me that it had only been about 10 minutes. I felt I had experienced a sudden and a hard reset. To calm down, I went for a walk in the now dark city park. Later on, I tried meditation again with the knowledge that something actually could happen. Several times I got on the edge, like when you're trying to sleep, and you can feel that now you are teetering over the brink to the la la land, but then you ruin it as you try too hard and you end up staying awake. If I was tired, I couldn't do it, and I would just get a headache from all the concentration and focusing. The hardest part was just to let go when you felt something was about to happen. One time I was successful. I started to feel this peculiar whole body humming that was very powerful, but not a regular physical sensation. I lost the feelings to my body parts one by one, and again I quite violently fell into myself, but this time I didn't fight it. The best I can describe it is that scene in the first Matrix movie, when Neo gets dropped to the empty white space of the loading area, but in this version you didn't even get the body of Neo, just his essence, and even though you couldn't see him, he was still there. I saw white without seeing anything in the traditional sense, and very faintly I still heard the sounds of my apartment, like the humming of my refrigerator and the cars going by my window. I had no sensation of myself, I didn't feel my body. Just a disembodied spirit that had dropped out of bounds like a video game character. I felt a profound peace and warm happiness in a way that you could never feel in normal life. The best comparison would be how you can feel absolute, pure terror in a nightmare, but in real life the fear is always bound to some specific thing, like a fear of high places or the anxiety of facing failure. I stayed in this white and softly blissful place for quite some time. Ironically, I was getting thirsty and my ass was starting to hurt from sitting in the same position for so long, so I was starting to have these disembodied sensations of a dry throat and a painful ass floating in the white void. I guess you can't even be enlightened without your ass hurting. Slowly I woke myself up to the regular life. The weirdest thing of all was this. In a way, the conversion was total and there was no going back to the regular experience of life I have had all these years before. Now, life felt like I was watching everything that happened to me or to others like from a backseat, like I didn't truly habit this body anymore, but I lived somewhere beyond the back of my head. This new sensation of me is divided in two, the regular me in the front and the disembodied spirit way more in the back, outside of it all. Kind of like a window stayed open from the void into the regular life, and the spirit is watching the comings and goings of me in the front, while also being me in a way. If you're familiar with Carl Jung, you might remember that he too had experienced this. Personality 1, his regular self, and a personality 2, some more ancient being that had been with him all his life. I had other instances of these sorts of experiences too. Once I did a bike ride of 110 kilometers, and at the time I just did judo and lifted weights, so I had no endurance of this kind to speak of. It was also my mom's bike, with a basket in the front and all, just 3 gears. It was dark and -3 Celsius outside. The first 20 kilometers were enjoyable, after that the whole trip became anything but. Halfway I had a meal and a change of clothes, but the last few kilometers I was so tired that I wanted to throw the bike into a ditch and just curl up to a ball on the side of the road. I had to walk the final stretch. I didn't have the strength to pedal anymore. At home I had a warm shower and food. I didn't feel too bad anymore. I slept like a dog. The next day it was like I had walked through God. Boundless euphoria and a complete ego death filled me for the whole day, and I did not have a single conscious thought for the whole time. I just functioned on an autopilot. I don't know if my coworkers noticed anything. The day after, I was my normal self again. I got flashes of the same euphoria through breathing exercises I tried. But I did draw the line on some things. I learned about the fire casino meditation, which consists of you staring at a candle for a while, then closing your eyes and watching the after image of the light you get until it fades, and then repeat the process. After doing this for extended periods of time, people have reported that they have had psychedelic levels of hallucinations. However, one of the Western proponents of this method, Dr. Daniel Ingram, said that you can have a profoundly frightful experience and have a panic attack. After trying a bit of the fire casino meditation, I could see with my eyes open a sparkling green light surrounding the candle, looking just as real as the candle itself. I have had no interest in trying psychedelics since I don't want to play around with my mental health, and the thought of a bad trip sounds terrifying. I called it quits with this method. I was finally finding literature that made sense to me. In Sigmund Freud's Civilization and its Discontents, right in the first page, Freud talks about one of his friends. Quote, "One of these outstanding men corresponds with me and in his letters calls himself my friend. I sent him a little piece of mind that treats religion as an illusion, and in his reply he said that he wholly agreed with my view of religion, but regretted that I had failed to appreciate the real source of religiosity. This was a particular feeling of which he himself was never free, which he had found confirmed by many others, and which he assumed was shared by millions. A feeling that he was inclined to call a sense of eternity, a feeling of something limitless, unbounded, as it were oceanic. This feeling was a purely subjective fact, not an article of faith. No assurance of personal immortality attached to it, but it was the source of the religious energy that was seized upon by the various churches and religious systems, directed into particular channels and certainly consumed by them. On the basis of this oceanic feeling alone, one was entitled to call oneself religious, even if one rejected every belief and every illusion. This opinion of my esteemed friend, who himself once celebrated the magic of illusion in poetic form, caused me no small difficulty. I can discover no trace of this oceanic feeling in myself. This absolutely captures what I felt after my meditation experiences and also illustrates the difference between religious and non-religious people. Other book I found was about the European mystics of medieval times, The Mystic Mind, The Psychology of Medieval Mystics and Ascetics by Jerome Kroll and Bernard Bacharach. In the Middle Ages, Europe did not have the same tradition of meditation as the East, so when you got into a monastery as a monk or a nun, you were basically left to your own devices. Some managed to feel the closeness of God through prayer, others didn't. The book recognizes a psychological attribute called absorption, an innate tendency of falling into altered states. For some it happens easily, and it can even be so prominent in some people that they can turn their experiences on and off like it was a light switch, and they have trouble staying in their regular reality. In the 1800s America, for example, there was a man called Andrew Jackson Davis, the Poughkeepsie seer, who could access the kingdom of God spontaneously. For others, they have no tendency at all to reach an altered state, no matter how much they try, and this caused great distress to some monks and nuns who tried to reach God. Everybody has seen in movies and other media how pious people in medieval times hurt and damaged their bodies in an attempt to get rid of their sins. Christianity saw the body as inherently sinful at the time, so that was one part of it, but the book argues that the opiates that your body will generate, once faced with a nagging pain, can also induce euphoria. This meant that the people who had no tendency at all to reach the altered states could through this way too feel the euphoric sensations of being close to God. Especially when you got them via hurting the sinful thing, the body itself, euphoria just underlined the thought that you were going the right way. One more example will suffice. I think the more recent UFO phenomenon also falls under this same umbrella. Psychologist John Mack interviewed a group of people who reported that they had been abducted by aliens at some point in their lives, and Mack wrote a book about it called Abduction. The patient cases follow more or less the same themes, how they were truly distressed by their experiences and how they had no one to talk about it since they didn't want to be labeled crazy. Many of them needed to be hypnotized to be able to recall the full experience, which often was quite frightful for them. Everyone's heard a million times the joke about being probed by the aliens during the abductions, but here you got the fuller pictures of the stories. In these abductions, the victims often had their seat taken so the aliens could create hybrid human-alien beings, and sometimes it was revealed that the victim himself, in fact, was also an alien. They had two beings in them, the regular human one, plus the more ancient and distant alien one. Here you can again recall Carl Jung's story about his personalities 1 and 2. The abductees were often given a mission to save the world since we were facing a looming destruction, often in the environmental sense. Then the aliens wanted his or her DNA to create a new species so humanity would be saved at least in some way. The aliens actually really were the good guys, and they wanted humanity to save itself. The abductee now emerged from the experience with a renewed purpose in life, after he had dealt with the initial trauma of it all through hypnosis and the help of the therapist. Many have noted how the modern UFO phenomenon likely is religiousness in a new form, since science can say that there is no God and supernatural, but it can't refute aliens and extraterrestrial beings just the same way. But it is easy to see how these abduction experiences have a story structure and a messianic mission in them. So where does all this lead us? My criticism is the wholly unoriginal one that religiousness does not exist in a vacuum. Politically, you can be far right, far left, moderate, conservative, Marxist, fascist, syndicalist, or any other possible thing, while at the same time being devoutly faithful. In the Middle Ages, Europeans were so religious that we probably can't even fathom it from our modern standpoint at all, but it also was a warrior culture. The world was extremely violent, and the Christian faith was bent to fit that frame. The highest classes in society were chosen by God, and they had all the land and political authority. Even if you had the experience of enlightenment, euphoria, and being close to God, it was a whole another thing where that would lead you as a society. The Aztecs were just as religious as everybody else, and their faith brought on waves of human sacrifices. You can just watch the Robert Eggers Viking movie The Northman and watch the scene where the berserker warriors bring themselves into a frenzy, then conquer a peasant village to sell the victims to slavery. The abuse comes from another direction too. Back in the 60s, during the Cold War, a KGB agent, Yuri Bezmenov, jumped to the West. Later on, in an interview you can find on YouTube, he tells how he was sent to India to look into the gurus who taught the young Western hippies. The Soviets saw this as a goldmine, since if the American people could get to be completely focused on their internal lives and gaze at their navels, that would make the American society more vulnerable and the Soviets could undermine their enemies from the inside. Realists often capture the idealists to further their own interests. It is sad to arrive to such a sour conclusion when wondering about the mysteries of life, but I think you need to be honest in the final analysis. I really haven't done much meditation after the first successes, since I figured that the real answers really can't be found in that direction, no matter how alluring and inviting it may seem. I still tend to fall on the side that what you are really doing with the trance states is that you are just messing around with the software of your brain to get abnormal responses. After all, you always are doing things that the human beings wouldn't normally do as they conduct their businesses. Staring at a candle, trying to sit still without thinking about anything, or overdoing physical tasks that go beyond your limits. I do see it as a glitch despite the magic of it all. Many prominent and brilliant people have always had unorthodox thoughts about the nature of reality, so we can't cast that out just like that. Astronaut Edgar Mitchell went to the moon in 1971, and he believed that human consciousness is something that comes from some outside source. The founding father of modern organic chemistry, August Kekule, revealed that he had discovered benzene because of a dream he saw where he imagined a snake eating its own tail, like the ancient symbol of Ouroboros. Even if I or someone else would say that their experiences are fake and deluded, it will completely miss the point. A movie is a fake thing, people acting on a set that was filmed, but that is not the point of movies. In the world of metaphysics, many instances and attributes do not exist in this life the same way like this computer or your phone does, but still our cultures and societies revolve around, or should revolve around, these concepts, like the value of human life, which is a thing that you can't scientifically and empirically measure. Just my 2 cents on the topic. Thanks for listening. Stay safe out there.